I became Republican Party chairman. She came on board and became my vice chairman. We worked very closely together to help turn things around, win the elections in 2004, take over the Oklahoma House. And one of those people that we worked with was Speaker Todd Hiett. Todd Hiett is one of the most ethical, hardworking individuals that I know. And I don't mean just in politics. I mean in life. And, to sit here and watch and see what's happening to him now is very similar to what happened to Commissioner Murphy, in that the consultants have decided, they've seen the numbers, they've done the polls, and they know that Todd Hiett is winning this race. And so now it's a matter of, it's not compare and contrast, it's a matter of character assassination, where they're coming after him so hard and so heavy and on things that have very little basis in fact, in some cases no basis in fact, just so they can have a winning candidate.
It's 8:26, Mitchell in the morning. State Auditor Gary Jones here this morning. Patrick McGuigan sitting in with us. But what the Auditor Jones is talking about is the race between former Speaker Todd Hiett and Senator Cliff Brannon for the soon-to-be open Corporation Commission seat. Now, Auditor, the Brannon campaign, and by the way, the door's open. We'll be delighted to talk to them at any time, says that Todd Hiett took the first step in misleading voters. What do you say to that?
Well, what Todd Hiett said is that Cliff Brannon has a 100% rating with the Sierra Club. And the Sierra Club is a radical left-wing group that is environmentalists that are responsible for what's going to happen in Oklahoma, which is the shutdown of a lot of coal-fire generation plants, which is going to raise the rates. Cliff himself has admitted that he has a 100% rating with the Sierra Club. And what's interesting, they come back and say, well, when you compare it head-to-head, and when Todd Hiett was in the House and Cliff was in the Senate, Todd actually had a higher rating. And that year, Todd had a 33%, which was the highest rating that Todd has ever had, and Cliff had a 30%. Well, in subsequent years, since Todd Hiett's gone, Cliff has gone to a 100% rating with the Sierra Club. I guess maybe Todd being there helped keep Cliff down, but anyway, so that is fact, and I think that's fair game. Talk about your record, talk about your stance, talk about these things. That's fair game.
Our auditor and inspector is in. We appreciate that. Patrick B. McGuigan, capital B. OK. It's been a fairly sedate morning. We've covered a lot of topics, and now we're into the campaigns, 8 days away. Let me just ask you, Gary. This is one of those situations where there was a fella that came from California back in the 60s, and he said that Republicans should not attack each other. That's paraphrasing. What was the exact quote?
The 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of thy fellow Republican. And Reagan stuck to that, except after about 3 times maybe of being zinged, he would zing back with a one-liner, and that was the end of it. Because, and he even extended that to a lot of the Democrats. He just was a kind of a kinder, gentler campaigner. People have forgotten that.
Yeah, and the thing about it is right now, years ago, and it hadn't been that many years ago, that Republicans were hoping to win elections in Oklahoma. I mean, for 100 years, basically the Democrats controlled the state. Now we've gone to supermajorities in the House, supermajorities in the Senate.
So we're acting like Democrats.
Well, we
circular firing squad.
I made the comment the other day about, we used to talk about decisions being made in smoke-filled rooms, budgets being done in smoke-filled rooms. I said that's absolutely not true, because there's no smoking at the Capitol anymore.
Yeah.
But it's, we're looking at these campaigns right now. When you see people, you see from where we've come. In 2002, after 2002, everybody thought that Steve Larsen was going to be governor. And I will tell you, in my opinion, what happened there was that we were not organized and we did not perform to the same level that the Democrats did. And that's why I ended up running for chairman. But we started in 2003 and said, what do we do to turn this around? So I went out and started working with people like Todd Hiett to go out and recruit good candidates basically in rural Oklahoma, because we had pretty well maxed out in the metro areas, and said, our job is to go find the best individuals that can best represent these communities and help them get elected. And in many cases, it was people that were outspent tremendously, but we outworked them. We found the best candidates, and so we took over the House in 2004, and Todd Hiett became the first Republican speaker, in 80 years, and actually the first time in the history of the state that Republicans had more members of the House of Representatives than the Democrats. Because back 80 years ago, or now 90 years ago, it was a coalition between Republicans and another party that was allowed a Republican speaker to get elected for the first time. But you sit there and you worked and you saw people going out and recruiting candidates, and it wasn't a matter of who has the most money. It was who would be the best representative for this district. And I worked with Todd Hiett and others to, and then in 2006, we both ran for statewide office. And it was a horrible year for Republicans. I mean, if you remember, when there was like 4 Republicans that outperformed the top of the ticket, the governor candidate, by 15 points. And if you were able to do that, you probably, most people would think you win.
That's you and Brenda Renault were the two closest.
Brenda Renault, myself, Todd Hiett, and Brenda Renault were all right there together. And Brenda, an incumbent, got beat. But instead of whining and going away and not, and saying, you know what, I got beat, it's all over with, we both came back. I became chairman again. We put together the plan to do what was necessary to get over that hump. And the guy that volunteered to come on board and be the state finance chairman for the Republican Party was Todd Hiett, and volunteered to do it at no cost and spent his time to go help others.
Even in the liberal media, which I'm always accused of being part of, and I am part of the media, the news media. But that third time you ran, I don't know if you knew it, but you had some admirers, secret admirers, among the press corps because you'd stuck with it. And there is something to that. That's kind of, and that happened with Reagan, in slow motion, that by the latter half of his second term in Washington, the love fest began, sometimes from the same people who had excoriated him early in his presidency. So sticking with it, there's something to be said for that. And sticking to who you are and keeping it real in the long run is better than these quick hit, negative kind of campaigns. What that might gain you, but in the end you lose something.
Well, and as you know, Pat, I wasn't going to run that last time. I mean, I thought, your family suffers a lot. When you get viciously attacked on negative ads that are untrue, and your family takes it harder than you do.
You showed up at 5 till, was it? 5 or 6 till?
15 till. And it wasn't until the last day of filing at 6 o'clock in the morning, it was my wife that said, you know what, so I'm going to go back to Oklahoma. So we had our third grandchild the day before the last day of filing. And I was going back to Oklahoma City, and I said, you know what, I'm going to just go finish out my job, my term, and come home. And my wife says, before you make your final decision about whether to run for this position, think about this. It's November 3rd, and you just woke up. What are you thinking? Well, November 3rd was the day after the election. And like a light bulb that went on, I said, you know what? It's a different political scenario now. Republicans will have advantage in this year, where 2 times I ran before, Democrats had a huge advantage. And the thing about it is my passion for why I got involved in politics back in 1993, about trying to do things to change the trend, change the pattern, make it a better place for our kids and grandkids, had not gone away. I know for a fact that several people have tried to talk Todd Hiett into running for other offices. And Todd, after 2008, went back, and after 2006, went back and reestablished his farm and operations and went in the private sector. And so people went to Todd and said, you know what, Todd, you need to come run because you're the perfect guy for this, because you have the backbone and the spine to stand up for what's right and make these tough decisions.
8:43 Mitchell in the morning. State Auditor Gary Jones, Patrick B. McGuigan in. Let me ask you this, Gary, before we go to break. So you're violating the 11th commandment, as we were joking about earlier, the so-called 11th commandment. Well, why are you doing this, by the way? I mean, what and who do you hold responsible for what you say is really out of bounds?
Well, and Cliff Brannon's not a bad guy. And I'm not, and the only thing I said was that I've got issues with Cliff Brannon's rating with the Sierra Club and his stances that I think, and even a bill he even tried to get passed that would have hurt coal-fired plants, which caused our rates to go up. So that being said, I'm not attacking Cliff Brannon as an individual, but what I am upset with is this win at all cost attitude by these consultants that say that we don't care. We're going to go out and character assassinate a good person that we know is probably the better candidate for the job. We're just not getting paid by him. This is about big bucks. This is about consulting fees, and this is about consultants making a lot of money on campaigns, and also not just this campaign, but maybe future campaigns, because other candidates may go, you know what, you had the money advantage, and you didn't win, so why do we want to hire you? And so it's all about the consultants. This is all about the consultants.
All right, he's going to stay with us. We have got our auditor and inspector, Gary Jones, in with us. We're delighted to have you.
It's good to be here.
It's becoming very apparent that as we get into this last 8 days, the comparison and contrast, or however you want to talk about them, are going to be pretty heavy. Now, so we now have you in talking.
There is a difference between comparison and contrast and character assassination, and I think a lot of these ads have crossed the line from one to the other.
What do you want people to walk away from this morning? I mean, you're doing something that's pretty extraordinary, which is coming out against another Republican in a primary.
Well, I'm coming out for an individual and taking up for an honorable, one of the most ethical, hardworking individuals that I know, and watching him being, his character being assassinated, and because they can't win without this. They can't win the race unless, and I was listening this morning, and I think that Colonel Russell said that he talked to somebody, and someone said you got to chop their legs out so they can make them shorter so you can look taller. And that's exactly the case, is that, Patrick McGuigan, when he was talking about the fact that he was at a forum, it was Oklahoma Federation of Republican Women, and they took a straw poll, and it was 128-20 in favor of Todd Hiett. These are people that are very engaged in politics, that know Todd Hiett, know what an honorable person he is, and support him. And now, what you've got is you've got people with a whole lot of money coming out trying to say, if you looked at that and you saw that ad, you would think that Todd Hiett was a despicable individual.
All right, let's go through. Let's go through this real quick.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a picture of the Oklahoma Gazette that says he was basically involved in the pay-for-play scandal.
Listen, I know what happened there. And Todd Hiett was not involved in that. That was another individual, and that individual had to resign their position in disgrace. And that was not Todd Hiett. And so to implicate that was something that, then they had one that said that Todd Hiett raised the budget 30%.
Yep.
Okay, Todd Hiett was the first Republican speaker. You had a Democrat governor, you had a Democrat Senate, and Todd Hiett actually got the biggest tax cut in the history of Oklahoma passed through a Democrat House and a Democrat governor, or Democrat Senate, Democrat governor. And how could Todd Hiett raise the budget 30%? One individual. What happened was revenues grew because the economy was good at that particular point in time, and Todd took the step of cutting revenues and the budget because it was growing so high. So, but to implicate or to imply that he raised the budget 30% is just ridiculous.
How about the bank director? They say he was a bank director and the bank got a bailout and then it didn't pay it back on time?
Well, first of all, they're trying to allude that that's like the TARP money. It wasn't TARP. It was community banks. And what they said was that community banks said, you need to take this money because we need you to make more loans to stimulate the economy. And he was a director. He was one of several individuals on that board. He was not the person running the bank. He was just one of several. But the implication was that it's tied to that, and that's not true. So it's totally, completely misleading and done in such a manner to make it look like it was part of Obama's, TARP bailout plan. And it wasn't.
So what do you want people to say?
I want
your
people,
takeaway on this.
Here's my takeaway. My takeaway is that anybody can put anything in an ad and put that out there as if it's the gospel. And it's not. You can take something and say, okay, well, maybe a scandal happened, so we're going to tie it to Todd Hiett. Well, it didn't happen because of Todd Hiett, and Todd Hiett was not involved in it. So, but you put that out there and you try to put doubt in people's minds. Here's what you need to do. Go back and look at the entire political history of Todd Hiett, and follow his story. This is a gentleman that when he went to OSU to go to college, he told his mother he was going to go get him a place to stay. He went and rented him a farm, put him a trailer house on the farm, and went home and started moving his cows because he didn't want his family to have to take care of his cattle when he was at college. So he took his cows to college with him so he could take care of them. And he ran for office because he was fed up with the overreach of federal government coming in and demanding that they were infringing on his rights. So he stood up and then decided that he was going to get involved. And then he became the minority leader, and then he became the speaker because he worked hard to help get other individuals elected. And he has a long history. But look at those individuals. Look what they stand for. Look and ask yourself, this is a regulatory position. Who's the person that's going to stand up and say, I'm going to make a decision based on what's best for the majority of Oklahomans, and has the backbone to stand up to special interests? And I think when you look at that and look at the other individual that's running, there is no question as to who I want standing up, representing myself, my family, my kids, and my grandkids on rate decisions and making those tough decisions. So look at the individuals and base your decision based on who you are and what research you've done, not what some paid political advertisement says.
It's pretty hard for people to do, and we'll repeat. That's State Auditor Gary Jones. And by the way, we'll say this. I think we said it earlier, which is basically, if Cliff Brandon or some of his folks like to come on, the door is obviously open.
Absolutely, we're here.
Put these guys side by side and ask them the same tough questions, and I guarantee you, in this particular case, there is no question who's the most qualified.
Well, thanks for being here, by the way.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in. Extraordinary interview, extraordinary position here.